There's a specific kind of pain that comes from being invisible. You speak, but your words float past like smoke. You contribute, but others get the credit. You're present, but somehow still overlooked. It's not dramatic rejection. That would almost be easier to process. It's something worse, casual dismissal. The sense that you simply don't register as significant in other people's worlds. Maybe it's the colleague who talks over you in meetings, the friend group that makes plans without asking if you're available, the family member who seeks everyone's opinion except yours, the romantic interest who keeps you as an option while pursuing someone else. Each instance feels small, but they accumulate into a weight that presses on your chest, the realization that you don't command the respect you deserve. The instinct is to fight for attention, to speak louder, demand recognition, prove your worth. But here's what most people never realize. That approach makes you less visible, not more. Desperation for validation repels the very respect you're seeking. The more you chase acknowledgement, the further it retreats. The Stoics understood something profound about human nature. True power doesn't come from controlling how others see you. It comes from mastering how you respond to how they see you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't philosophical decoration. It's the foundation of a transformation that makes people who once ignored you suddenly take notice, not because you demanded their attention, but because you stopped needing it. Emotional control is the most underrated form of power. When you can remain calm while others panic, silent while others rage, grounded while others spiral, you become magnetic, not through force, but through presence, not through performance, but through genuine mastery. And here's what happens. The same people who overlooked you begin to watch. They notice something has shifted. They can't quite name it, but they feel it. You've become someone who doesn't break, someone who doesn't beg, someone who exists on your own terms. This isn't about revenge, it's about revolution, internal revolution that changes everything external. Today, I want to share with you 7 Stoic laws of emotional control that will transform how you move through the world. These aren't theories or motivational platitudes. They're specific practices that rewire your nervous system, reshape your responses, and rebuild your presence from the inside out. Before we begin, I want you to do something that matters. Write this in the comments. I am the master of my emotions. Not because it's true yet, but because you're committing to making it true. Every journey of transformation begins with a declaration. This is yours. Write it now, not for me, not for anyone else watching, but for the version of yourself you're becoming. The version that no one will be able to ignore because you've learned the secret. The people who command the most attention are the ones who need it the least. Let's begin. Law 1. Stop reacting, start responding. The gap between reaction and response is where your power lives. Most people collapse these two into one action. Something happens, emotion surges, words or actions immediately follow. Stimulus and response fuse together so tightly there's no space for choice. That's reaction, automatic, emotional, often regrettable. Response is different. Response creates space between what happens and how you act. In that space, you reclaim control. You observe your emotion instead of becoming it. You choose your next move instead of being pushed into it. I watched this principle transform someone's entire career. Daniel worked in corporate finance. He was brilliant with numbers, but had a reputation problem. Whenever someone questioned his analysis in meetings, he'd get defensive immediately. His voice would rise, his face would flush, and he'd argue aggressively even when the question was reasonable. People started avoiding him, not because his work was bad, it was excellent, but because interacting with him felt like walking through a minefield. His manager finally pulled him aside. "Your technical skills are outstanding, but your emotional reactions are limiting your career. People don't want to work with someone who might explode at any moment." Daniel was stunned. He thought he was defending his work, maintaining standards, refusing to be undermined. He didn't realize how his inability to pause was making him look weak, not strong. Here's what he didn't understand. The person who reacts instantly is controlled by external events. The person who responds deliberately controls themselves. He started practicing something specific. Whenever someone questioned his work, before saying anything, he would take 3 full breaths. That's it. 3 breaths. In that tiny window, something shifted. He'd notice his defensive anger rising and recognize it for what it was, fear that his competence was being challenged. Then he could choose, let fear dictate his response or let reason guide it. Within months, the dynamic changed completely. Someone would question a figure. Daniel would pause, breathe, then say calmly, "Good question. Let me walk you through my methodology." Or, "I hadn't considered that angle. Give me a day to review." His competence hadn't changed, but his demeanor had. And suddenly, people sought his input. They trusted him with bigger responsibilities. The promotion he'd been chasing for years came 6 months after he learned to respond instead of react. The Stoic principle here is straightforward. Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space lies your freedom. Epictetus taught that we're disturbed not by events, but by our views of events. You cannot control what others say or do. You cannot control circumstances, but you always control the space between what happens and how you respond. Here's how you practice this. Identify your triggers. What situations make you react automatically? Criticism, disrespect, being interrupted, feeling undervalued. Write them down. Then commit to one practice. Before responding to your trigger, pause. Count to 3. Take 3 breaths. Create space where before there was none. At first, your body will resist. Your nervous system is wired for instant reaction. It thinks pausing equals weakness, vulnerability, danger. But that's the old you, the reactive you, the you that people could easily dismiss because your emotions were so readable, so predictable, so easy to manipulate. The new you understands that the pause isn't weakness, it's mastery. You're not suppressing emotion. You're choosing whether that emotion serves you. Sometimes anger is appropriate. Sometimes stern words are needed. But when you choose them from a place of calm awareness rather than knee-jerk reaction, they carry weight. They command respect. People who once talked over you will start to wait for your response. They'll sense something has changed. You're no longer easy to rattle. You're no longer predictable in your emotional swings. You've become someone who thinks before speaking, who acts with intention, who cannot be pushed into revealing more than you choose to reveal. Law 2. Master the pause. Silence is the most underrated weapon in human interaction. Not the silent treatment, that's manipulation. Not awkward silence, that's social anxiety. I'm talking about deliberate, powerful silence, the kind that makes people lean in, the kind that creates gravity. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill every gap in conversation, believing that constant talking equals value. They're wrong. Excessive talking reveals insecurity. Desperate talking reveals need for validation. Non-stop talking reveals lack of self-control. Strategic silence reveals confidence. Sarah learned this the hard way. She was in sales, and for years she struggled to close deals. She was knowledgeable, enthusiastic, likable, yet her numbers lagged behind peers. Her manager started shadowing her sales calls to identify the problem. Within 20 minutes, it became obvious. Sarah couldn't tolerate silence. The moment she finished her pitch, before the client could even process what she'd said, she'd start adding more information. And another benefit is, oh, I should also mention. She'd talk and talk and talk, filling every second, answering questions the client hadn't asked, creating solutions for problems they hadn't raised. She thought she was being helpful, thorough, responsive. She was actually sabotaging herself. Her need to fill silence communicated desperation. It said, "I'm so afraid you'll reject my offer that I can't even give you space to think about accepting it." It reduced her authority and made clients uncomfortable. They felt pressured, overwhelmed, unable to process. Her manager gave her one instruction: after you present the offer, stop talking. Let them sit with it. Count to 30 in your head if you must, but do not speak first. Sarah thought this was insane. 30 seconds of silence. In a professional setting, it felt like asking her to jump off a cliff. But she tried it. On her next call, she presented the solution, stated the price, and forced herself silent. The seconds felt eternal. Her palms sweated. Her mind screamed at her to say something, anything. The client sat there, looking at the proposal, face unreadable. 23 seconds passed. Sarah was counting. Then the client looked up and said, "When can we start?" That deal was the first of many. Sarah's close rate doubled within a quarter, not because her pitch improved, but because she learned that silence gives people room to convince themselves. Her pause communicated confidence. "I've presented the value. I know it's solid. I don't need to convince you further because the merit speaks for itself." The Stoics practiced this deeply. They understood that wisdom often lies in withholding, not expressing. Seneca wrote, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But it's more than just listening. It's about understanding that your silence can be more powerful than your words. When someone insults you and you pause before responding or don't respond at all, you demonstrate that their words don't control you. When someone asks your opinion and you take a moment before speaking, your answer carries more weight. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain calmly silent, you've won without fighting. Here's how to develop this. Practice micro pauses in every conversation. When someone finishes speaking, count to 2 before you respond. It feels unnatural at first. Your impulse is to jump in immediately, prove you're engaged, show you're quick. But that 2-second pause does something profound. It proves you actually heard them. It signals respect. It demonstrates thoughtfulness. Next level. When someone asks a provocative question or makes a challenging statement, let the silence extend. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Maintain eye contact. Stay relaxed. Watch what happens. Often they'll start backpedaling, explaining, filling the space with their own discomfort. You've shifted the power dynamic without saying a word. The ultimate practice: learn to be comfortable with silence in your own presence. Sit alone without your phone, without music, without distraction. Just you and silence. Notice how your mind rebels, how it creates noise to fill the void. Practice until you can sit in silence peacefully. When you're comfortable with your own silence, you become unshakable in everyone else's presence. People who once ignored you will find themselves unable to ignore your silence. It creates a vacuum that demands attention. They'll wonder what you're thinking. They'll value your words more when they come. They'll respect your restraint. And they'll regret every time they assumed your lack of constant commentary meant you had nothing to say. Law 3. Detach from outcomes. Your anxiety about being ignored is rooted in attachment. Attachment to how others perceive you. Attachment to specific outcomes. Attachment to validation you believe will finally make you feel worthy. That attachment is your weakness. It makes you manipulable. It keeps you emotionally dependent on circumstances beyond your control. The Stoics taught that suffering comes from wanting things to be different than they are. When you're attached to an outcome, getting acknowledged, receiving praise, being included, you've handed your peace to external forces. You've made your emotional state hostage to other people's choices. Real freedom comes from detachment. Not indifference, detachment. You still care, you still try, you still engage. But your inner stability doesn't depend on results. I know someone who embodied this transformation. Marcus, yes, really his name, had been trying to get promoted for 3 years. He worked overtime constantly, volunteered for every extra project, and made his desire for advancement obvious to anyone who'd listen. His identity became wrapped up in this goal. Every performance review that didn't result in promotion felt like personal rejection. He grew bitter. He'd complain about colleagues who got promoted with less effort. He'd analyze every interaction with leadership for signs of approval. His whole emotional state rose and fell based on whether he felt valued by the company. He wasn't working anymore, he was begging. Then something shifted. His mentor, who studied Stoic philosophy, told him, "You're trying to control something you cannot control. Stop competing for the promotion. Do excellent work, because excellence is its own reward. If promotion comes, good. If it doesn't, you've still become more skilled. Your inner growth doesn't require their validation." Marcus found this advice both liberating and terrifying. What if he stopped caring and the promotion never came? But he was exhausted from caring so much, so he tried something different. He focused solely on mastery. He studied his craft deeply, not to impress anyone, but to become genuinely better. He helped colleagues without calculating whether it would be noticed. He contributed ideas without tracking who got credit. 3 months into this shift, something remarkable happened. The desperation left his interactions. He stopped positioning every conversation with leadership as a subtle pitch for promotion. He became someone who contributed value without emotional strings attached. And people noticed, not his desire to be promoted, but his competence and stability. 6 months later, he got the promotion. But here's what matters more. When they told him, his reaction was calm gratitude, not relief or validation. He'd already detached from needing it. Getting it was nice. Not getting it would have been fine too. He'd learned that his worth wasn't determined by their decision. Epictetus taught, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This applies to emotional wealth too. When you need less external validation, you possess more internal peace. When you're attached to specific outcomes, every setback feels like devastation. When you're detached, setbacks become information, nothing more. Here's the practice. Identify what you're attached to. What outcome would devastate you if it didn't happen? Recognition from a specific person. Success in a particular area. Being included in a certain group. Write it down. Now ask, who would I be if I stopped needing this? What would I do differently if I knew this specific outcome was impossible? Then live from that place. Do the work. Put in the effort. But release your grip on the results. Imagine you're tending a garden. You plant seeds, water them, remove weeds, but you don't control whether they bloom. You do your part excellently, then accept whatever grows. This doesn't mean lowering standards or giving up. It means understanding that your job is effort and excellence. Results are separate. When you stop needing specific outcomes, you stop appearing needy. When you stop appearing needy, people suddenly find you more valuable. It's counterintuitive but true. The less you need validation, the more respect you receive. The people who ignored you when you were desperate for acknowledgement will take notice when you're no longer seeking it. Your detachment creates mystery. Your calm in the face of rejection creates respect. Your ability to continue excellently, whether recognized or not, creates admiration. They'll regret dismissing you because you've become someone who no longer cares if they do. Law 4. Transform rejection into redirection. Every rejection is information. It's telling you something valuable if you're wise enough to hear it. But most people take rejection as judgment on their worth, when it's actually feedback about fit, timing, or approach. The Stoics understood that obstacles aren't barriers. They're redirections toward better paths. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Every time someone ignores or rejects you, they're giving you a gift, if you choose to see it that way. They're showing you where you don't fit, which frees you to find where you do. They're highlighting weaknesses you can strengthen. They're teaching you who deserves your energy and who doesn't. But you have to reframe how you interpret rejection. Most people's interpretation process works like this. Rejection occurs, I'm not good enough, shame, withdrawal, confirmation bias that everyone will reject them. This spiral makes each subsequent rejection feel worse than the last. The Stoic interpretation works differently. Rejection occurs. This path is closed. Curiosity about why, adjustment, trying different approaches or different targets. Each rejection becomes data, not destiny. I learned this watching a writer friend handle manuscript rejections. Anna had written a novel and submitted it to literary agents. She received 43 rejections over 8 months. 43. Each one was a variation of, "This isn't the right fit for our list," or "The market is too competitive for this genre right now." Most writers would give up or spiral into self-doubt. Anna did something different. She analyzed each rejection carefully. She noticed patterns. Several mentioned the pacing. A few suggested the protagonist needed more depth. One noted the ending felt rushed. Instead of seeing these as attacks, she saw them as consulting feedback she hadn't paid for. She revised, not because she believed the book was terrible, but because she recognized there was room for improvement. 6 months later, she submitted again to a new list of agents. This time, 3 requested the full manuscript. 1 offered representation. The book sold to a publisher the following year. Here's what Anna understood that most people miss. Those 43 rejections weren't saying, "You're not a writer." They were saying, "This version isn't ready," or "We're not the right match." Every rejection was redirection toward better craft, toward agents more aligned with her style, toward persistence as part of the process rather than evidence of failure. The Stoic view is that everything happens for a reason, and that reason is to strengthen you. Not in a mystical, everything happens for a reason way that denies pain, but in a practical way that asks, given that this happened, how can I use it to become better? When someone ignores your input in a meeting, it's information. Perhaps your delivery needs work, or maybe that person isn't worth impressing. When a romantic interest rejects you, it's information. They've saved you from pursuing someone who doesn't recognize your value. When you don't get the job, it's information. Either you need to develop more skills or that role wasn't the right fit. Here's how to practice this. When rejection happens, implement a 24-hour rule. For 24 hours, you're allowed to feel whatever comes up. Disappointment, anger, hurt. Feel it fully. Don't suppress it. But after 24 hours, you must shift to analysis mode. Ask 3 questions. What can I learn from this? Where might this be redirecting me? How can this make me stronger? Write down honest answers. Look for patterns. If you keep getting similar feedback, there's probably something there worth addressing. If the rejection is inconsistent or vague, it's probably about fit, not fundamental flaws. Use rejection as a compass. It points away from where you shouldn't go, which helps you find where you should. The most powerful shift is this. Stop asking, "Why don't they want me?" Start asking, Why would I want to be where I'm not valued? That question changes everything. It moves you from supplicant to evaluator. It reminds you that respect is a two-way street. Their rejection of you is simultaneously your rejection of them. They don't get to access your gifts. They don't get your energy, your creativity, your contribution. Their loss, truly. When you genuinely embody this mindset, something remarkable happens. People sense it. They sense that their rejection doesn't diminish you. They sense that you're evaluating them as much as they're evaluating you. And suddenly rejections decrease, because confidence, real confidence that doesn't crumble under no, is magnetic. The people who ignored you when you were desperate for their approval will regret it when they see you thriving without it. When they realize you took their rejection and used it as fuel. When they watch you succeed in spaces where you do fit. When they understand too late that you didn't need them, they needed you. Law 5. Practice voluntary discomfort. Emotional control isn't developed in comfort. It's forged in deliberate discomfort. The Stoics practiced what they called voluntary hardship, choosing difficulty to strengthen themselves. They'd sleep on hard surfaces, eat simple food, expose themselves to cold, go without pleasures they could afford, not as punishment, but as training. Why? Because when you regularly choose discomfort, you build resilience to unavoidable discomfort. When you practice small pains voluntarily, large pains become manageable. When you train your emotional regulation system, it doesn't fail when you need it most. Modern life is designed for comfort. Every inconvenience has been engineered away. Too hot? Adjust the thermostat. Too quiet? Turn on a screen. Too bored? Scroll endlessly. Too anxious? Numb it with substances, shopping, distractions. We've created a world where discomfort of any kind feels intolerable, and in doing so, we've made ourselves fragile. When you can't tolerate minor discomfort, you can't control your emotions, because emotions are uncomfortable. Anger is uncomfortable. Sadness is uncomfortable. Anxiety is uncomfortable. Disappointment is uncomfortable. If your default response to discomfort is immediate elimination, you'll never develop the capacity to sit with difficult emotions without reacting to them. I watched this principle change someone's entire emotional landscape. Tyler was reactive. Someone would slight him and he'd immediately retaliate, biting comment, passive-aggressive behavior, or overt confrontation. He couldn't sit with the discomfort of being disrespected, so he'd act impulsively to discharge it. His therapist suggested he start with physical discomfort training. Every morning, Tyler would take a cold shower, 5 minutes of deliberately uncomfortable cold water. The first time, he lasted 90 seconds before giving up. His body screamed at him to stop. His mind created elaborate justifications for why this was stupid, unnecessary, potentially harmful. But he kept going. Eventually, 5 minutes became manageable. Not comfortable, manageable. He learned that he could tolerate discomfort without it destroying him. His body adapted. His nervous system learned that discomfort doesn't always signal danger. Then he applied this to emotional discomfort. Someone would insult him, and instead of immediately responding, he'd sit with the anger. He'd let it burn without feeding it. Like the cold shower, the first attempts were almost unbearable. The urge to lash out was overwhelming, but he'd learned from the cold water. Discomfort passes if you don't flee from it. 6 months into this practice, Tyler was unrecognizable. Someone who used to provoke him would try the same tactics, and he'd simply observe his own reaction without acting on it. He'd feel the anger rise, watch it peak, notice it subside. Then he'd respond calmly, or not respond at all. People stopped trying to provoke him because it stopped working. They couldn't get a reaction. They couldn't control him. He'd developed what the Stoics called an inner citadel, a core that external events couldn't breach. Here's how you build this. Start with physical discomfort. Cold showers are excellent. So are fasting protocols, intense exercise, or simply sitting still without distraction for extended periods. Choose something uncomfortable but safe, and do it regularly. Notice how your mind rebels, how it creates stories about why you should stop. Practice continuing anyway. Then extend to emotional discomfort. When you feel strong emotions, anger, jealousy, anxiety, practice sitting with them before acting. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Just observe the sensation in your body. Where do you feel it? How does it change? Can you tolerate it without having to fix, numb, or express it immediately? Practice delayed gratification. When you want something, wait. Want to check your phone? Wait 5 minutes. Want to respond to that message? Wait an hour. Want to buy something? Wait a day. You're training the capacity to tolerate the discomfort of unmet desire. That capacity is emotional control. The final level is choosing social discomfort. Have the awkward conversation. Set the difficult boundary. Say no when pressure mounts to say yes. Each time you choose temporary discomfort over long-term resentment, you strengthen your emotional core. What happens is this: you become unmanipulable, because manipulation works by making someone uncomfortable until they give the manipulator what they want. When you're comfortable with discomfort, manipulation fails. Emotional blackmail doesn't work. Social pressure doesn't work. Guilt trips don't work. You've trained yourself to sit with those uncomfortable feelings without needing to discharge them. The people who dismissed you because you were too reactive, too emotional, too easy to rattle, they'll notice the change. They'll test you, trying to provoke old patterns. When those patterns don't appear, when you remain unshakable, they'll be forced to respect you, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it through self-mastery. And they'll regret treating you like you were weak, because you've become strong in the only way that matters: control over yourself. Law 6. Speak less, observe more. The people who talk the most say the least. Constant commentary is a nervous habit, a way to fill space, a bid for attention that usually backfires. The Stoics knew that power lies in observation, not expression. When you speak less, people wonder what you're thinking. When you observe more, you understand what they're revealing. Most conversations are just two people waiting for their turn to talk. Neither is truly listening. Both are formulating their next statement, waiting for a pause to jump in. This creates a strange dynamic. Everyone talks, no one connects. Everyone expresses, no one understands. When you shift from constant expression to intentional observation, something remarkable happens. You begin to see patterns others miss. You notice the subtext beneath words. You read body language, tone shifts, what's not being said. This information gives you advantage, not for manipulation, but for wisdom. You understand situations more accurately. You respond more effectively. You make better decisions. I learned this watching my grandmother navigate complex family dynamics. She was the quietest person at every gathering, but somehow the most influential. While others argued, she listened. While others interrupted, she observed. While others competed for airtime, she simply paid attention. After events, family members would seek her out privately. They wanted her opinion because they knew it would be thoughtful. They trusted her judgment because she never spoke impulsively. She'd seen everything, heard everything, understood everything, because she wasn't busy broadcasting her own thoughts. Once, I asked her why she spoke so little. She said, "Everyone talks about themselves constantly. They'll tell you exactly who they are if you just pay attention. Why would I interrupt that valuable information?" She understood what most people miss. Observation is data collection. The more you observe, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more effective you become, not just at influencing others, but at protecting yourself, at recognizing opportunities, at avoiding traps. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus advised his students to be slow to speak and slower still to form opinions. He taught that most of what we say is unnecessary, and unnecessary speech weakens our words when we truly need them. If you speak constantly, your words lose value. If you speak selectively, your words carry weight. Here's how to practice this. In your next conversation, set a private goal. Speak 30% less than you normally would. When someone finishes talking, pause for 3 seconds before responding. Use that pause to actually process what they said, not to formulate your rebuttal. Ask questions instead of making statements. "Tell me more about that" is more powerful than launching into your own story. Notice what happens. First, people seem surprised. They're used to quick responses, automatic reactions. Your pause creates a different energy. Second, they often say more. When you don't rush to fill silence, they expand on their thoughts. You get information they wouldn't have shared otherwise. Third, and this is crucial, they remember you more positively, because you made them feel heard. In a world where everyone competes for attention, the person who gives it, instead of demanding it, becomes memorable. Apply this in meetings. Instead of jumping in with every thought, observe first. Watch how others interact. Notice who interrupts whom. Identify the actual decision makers versus the people who just talk a lot. When you do speak, make it count. One well-timed, thoughtful observation carries more impact than 10 hasty comments. In conflicts, this skill becomes essential. The person who remains calm and observant while others get emotional wins by default, because they're seeing clearly while others are blinded by feeling. They notice the real issue beneath the surface argument. They recognize when someone's anger is actually hurt, when defensiveness is actually fear. This awareness lets you de-escalate effectively or exit wisely. The ultimate practice: spend one entire day speaking only when necessary. Answer questions, fulfill obligations, but eliminate all unnecessary commentary, opinions offered without request, stories shared just to fill time. It's harder than it sounds. You'll notice how often you speak from nervousness, how much verbal filler you use, how frequently you interrupt your own observation with the need to express. This practice isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming intentional. You still connect, but you connect through presence rather than performance. You still contribute, but you contribute through insight rather than volume. What the people who ignored you will notice: you're no longer competing for attention. You're not trying to prove yourself through constant commentary. You're simply present, observant, and when you do speak, your words matter. This shifts their perception completely. They stop dismissing you as someone who talks too much or tries too hard. They start seeking your input because they've learned it will be valuable. Your selective speech becomes a form of power, not power over others, but power in how you're perceived and respected. And those who dismissed you when you were verbose will regret not paying attention to what you were actually saying when you finally learn to say less. Law 7. Become indifferent to insults. An insult only has the power you give it. This is perhaps the most liberating truth in Stoic philosophy. Someone can speak words intended to wound you, but those words are just sound waves. They become weapons only when you pick them up and stab yourself with them. Most people don't understand this. They believe that insults hurt automatically, that disrespect creates damage by default. So when someone insults them, they react as if they've been physically attacked, with anger, with defense, with counterattack. This reaction gives the insulter exactly what they wanted, proof that they've gotten under your skin. The Stoic approach is different. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." This isn't denial or suppression, it's recognition that your interpretation creates your experience. An insult is just information about the person speaking, not truth about you. Think about it. If someone called you a giraffe, you wouldn't be offended. You'd be confused, because you know you're not a giraffe. The statement has no connection to reality, so it can't wound you. The same logic applies to any insult. When someone calls you incompetent, stupid, worthless, they're revealing their own judgment, not objective truth. You can choose to reject their assessment just as easily as you'd reject being called a giraffe. But most people can't do this because they secretly fear the insult might be true. That's where the wound actually lives, not in the words, but in your own uncertainty about yourself. If you're secure in your competence, someone calling you incompetent rolls off like water. If you're insecure about your competence, the same words feel like a knife. I watched someone master this principle in real time. James worked in a high-pressure trading environment where verbal aggression was normalized. People would insult each other constantly. Attacks on intelligence, competence, masculinity, whatever would land. For the first year, James participated in this culture. Someone insulted him, he'd insult back. Someone questioned his judgment, he'd aggressively defend it. He thought this was how you earned respect in that environment. But it was exhausting. Every day felt like combat. His nervous system was constantly activated. He'd go home drained, replaying insults, crafting better comebacks he should have used. The job was burning him out, not from the work, but from the emotional warfare. Then a senior trader who seemed immune to the chaos pulled James aside. "You want to know the secret to surviving here? Stop caring when they insult you. They're trying to get a reaction. When they don't get one, they lose interest." James tried it. Next time someone insulted his trade, instead of defending or counterattacking, he simply said, "Okay," and returned to his work. The insulter was baffled. He tried again, harder. James shrugged. "You might be right." The insulter gave up. There's no satisfaction in attacking someone who won't fight back, who won't even acknowledge the attack as meaningful. Over the next months, James developed what looked like imperviousness. People would try to provoke him, and he'd respond with complete calm. Not passive-aggressive calm, genuine indifference. Something interesting happened. People stopped trying. Why waste energy insulting someone it doesn't affect? But more importantly, James's reputation shifted. He went from being another aggressive trader to being someone with unusual composure, senior management noticed. Within 18 months, he was promoted specifically because of his temperament. Here's what James learned and what you need to understand. The person who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. When insults don't land, the insulter loses power. They're throwing punches at air. And eventually, they stop because it makes them look foolish, not you. The practice is this. Next time someone insults you, pause. Take 3 breaths. Then ask yourself, is this actually true? If yes, what can I learn from it? If no, why would I adopt someone else's false opinion of me? Most importantly, does this person's judgment actually matter? Have they earned the right to evaluate me? Usually, the answer is no. Most insults come from people who don't know you well, don't understand your situation, or are projecting their own issues. Letting their words determine your emotional state is giving control of your inner world to someone unqualified to have it. Advanced practice. When insulted, respond with curiosity instead of defense. Why do you think that? This completely disrupts the expected pattern. The insulter wanted fight or flight. You gave them inquiry. Often they can't articulate why. The insult was just reflex, not considered judgment. Exposing this deflates it completely. Final level. Thank them. I appreciate your perspective, delivered without sarcasm. This requires significant emotional control, but it's devastating. You've taken their weapon and turned it into a gift. They can't hurt you with something you openly accept and thank them for providing. When you develop genuine indifference to insults, not fake indifference where you're secretly hurt but pretending not to be, real indifference where their words genuinely don't affect your inner state, you become formidable. People notice. The ones who dismissed you as too sensitive, too reactive, too easy to hurt will regret it when they realize you've developed emotional armor they can't penetrate. Not because you're cold or defensive, but because you've understood at a deep level that other people's opinions, especially hostile ones, don't define your reality. You define your reality. And when you truly own that, you become someone who cannot be ignored because you've stopped caring whether they ignore you or not. That paradox is the ultimate power. These 7 laws work together to create a transformation that happens from the inside out. You're not performing confidence or pretending to be unbothered. You're actually rewiring your nervous system, rebuilding your responses, and reconstructing your relationship with external validation. The people who ignored you weren't seeing the real you. They were seeing someone ruled by reactions, someone desperate for acknowledgement, someone easily provoked and controlled. They dismissed that person because that person was dismissible. But the person you become through mastering emotional control, calm under pressure, selective with speech, indifferent to insult, detached from outcome, that person commands natural respect, not demanded, not performed, simply present. And when those same people encounter this new version of you, something shifts. They lean in instead of looking past. They seek your opinion instead of dismissing it. They respect your silence instead of filling it. They regret ignoring you, not because you've changed to impress them, but because you've changed for yourself and they finally see what they missed. Now I want you to do one final thing. Go back to that comment you left at the beginning. I am the master of my emotions. Read it again. That wasn't just a statement, it was a commitment. Every practice I shared today is a tool for keeping that commitment. You won't master all of them immediately. This is long-term character building, not quick fixes. But every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose silence over noise, every time you sit with discomfort instead of fleeing it, you're strengthening that truth. If this message resonated with you, if you felt something shift, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom every week. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Come back when you need the reminder, because transformation isn't a straight line. It's a practice you return to again and again. See you in the next video. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to become unshakable. You just need to stop asking for it.